southbound, I've been hellbound, riding on the midnight train. Going too fast now, think I ought to slow down, standing in the pouring rain.
What's going on, guys? Tristan and Tony here with the One Hell of a Life Outdoor Podcast. What's going on, Deb?
Man, devil went down to Georgia looking for a soul to steal. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I shouldn't even ask what's going on, but we'll get into that another time. But man, this guy's been a deer slaying machine recently.
I've had the spirit of the wild flowing through me and the magical flight of the arrow.
For sure. But today we have on Joe Kiefner. We had him on back in the spring. He's the owner of Migration Station, and like I said in that other podcast, if you guys, listening probably at this point if you don't realize it, one way or the other, you've probably seen one of Joe's videos somewhere on social media, whether you realize it or not, is what I was trying to say. And it's just a really neat thing he's got going with tracking waterfowl migration and putting out updates and stuff. And we're excited to have him on for the second time and talk about some new features. Yeah. And we figured leading up to duck season, it'd be a good time, Joe. So yeah, man, if you wouldn't mind, just give everyone kind of a quick reminder, of who you are, what you do, and we can get right into it.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on here, and I think it's definitely worth a listen whenever they do talk about Tony's adventures down in Georgia, I guess is a good way to put it, because from just our talks before the podcast recording here, it sounds like there was a lot going on. But yeah, so my name is Joe Kiefner. I am the owner of Migration Station. We launched in 2022, August of 2022, so a little over a year and a half old now, and we just have a simple goal of making information about waterfowl and waterfowl migrations more accessible. And so we started out making Instagram posts and putting out some really rich visualizations about migration patterns, and then we started hosting migration data live and interactive on our website, migrationstationusa.com. And that took off. And then when we really kind of exploded is when we started posting our kind of semi-weekly migration updates, where we just kind of highlight the weeks ahead and what the weather patterns look like, and where we think the birds might move from and move to. And, we're not 100% accurate, but we connect on some of them, and people just really like to hear what potential there is out there. So yeah, that's kind of Migration Station in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, what you said. People like to hear the potential that's out there, because that's a kind of how you got to take these things at the end of the day. It's, with a grain of salt, right? Because it's like, you can hear whatever survey or whatever. Oh yeah, there's, this many birds, which can be, it's factual stuff. Like I know some of the other, things we follow is like Forbes Biological Station and some of those places like that where, they're flying these waterfowl surveys. And it's like, but the ducks are still ducks, and your little pond in the backwoods or whatever might not have ducks in it, so it's just, it's cool to know, like you said, but take with a grain of salt too,
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. I mean, Mother Nature is always in control, and I can personally attest that there are days where I tell myself, I don't even know why I'm going out here, because this is going to be terrible. It's going to be a waste of time. And it ends up being some of the best hunts I've been on. And then there are days where I thought for sure we were just going to bust them, and didn't see a single thing. So, you never can tell, but some good advice that was given to me a long time ago that I try to adhere to as much as I can is you're not going to get them sitting from the couch. I can guarantee you that.
That's
unless
right.
You're in one of those Taj Mahal, Arkansas blinds that have couches in them. And that's, I think that's the exception. That's not the rule.
Yeah, I know. Right. Yeah. That's one of my favorites. We've always said can't kill them from the couch, but same difference.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, man. But no, that's coming from the guy that has that's the owner of Migration Station. That if anybody has his pulse on it, it'd be you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and Joe, just for anybody that's new and stuff, kind of break down, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of how you compile the data that you do to bring this stuff to everybody.
And I know last time you were saying some of it's like, it's proprietary, but all that.
Yeah. So we're still patent pending. So, I mean, that's an 18 to 24 month process. So we won't know for a while on all that, but we feel pretty confident about it. But what I can say is, like, the best way to explain it is we've written a long list, or a lot of software code that effectively just takes information that's exists in 100 different places and dozens of different formats. We gather it, we put it into a usable, easy to understand map or visualization, and we publish it. So the best way that I know to kind of explain it is that we just, we're almost a little bit like a news agency. Like, we just take information from all over the place and put it into one place, and try to make it easy for folks to comprehend, to where they don't have to spend an hour trying to figure out what the heck's going on, and looking at all these different places that when they get to the 10th link or the third or fourth audio that they've listened to, they forgot what they saw or what they heard, 30 minutes ago. We're just trying to make it all more accessible.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because you find yourself, like you said, going down a lot of different rabbit holes, and it's nice to have stuff compiled, especially if you're in a situation where, let's say you're coming from like the Atlantic Flyway like us, and you're taking that Mississippi Flyway or Central Flyway trip or whatever, and you're like, well, this can at least give me a ballpark idea of maybe the area I would want to be in, that would best serve my time,
Yeah, and I would go out and say that, like, we try really hard, and we'll get into it a little bit more later when we talk about the AI piece of it, but we try really hard, or I try really hard to authenticate the data that we take in. So I try not to display information that is not verifiable or not factual. So, like, we get tons of information from word of mouth, and all of it's, really good hearted, but a lot of it we can't use because I don't want to be putting something out there into the world that might not be factual in nature, because I would hate for someone to make a decision based off of that when it's not as verifiable or as authentic as I could possibly make it, sitting from my house in Oklahoma.
Right.
And so we try to make all this stuff, as truthful as possible. And I won't say I'm the source of truth, or Migration Station's the source of truth, but we really, really try to be. And we got really good feedback last year. We got a lot of people who reached out to us after the season and said, look, like, I don't get a lot of days off, and Migration Station wasn't the magic bullet to easy limits, but it helped me feel better about making my decision on, maybe I don't take off this Friday. Maybe I'll wait because the areas that I would go to, it's not as good as it possibly could be, or the inverse. Like, hey, I got a random mulligan of a day I took off, and it was worth the time. That is why we exist, and I was super pleased to hear that folks were able to see a benefit from us in that sense. So that made us feel really good.
Oh, well, I bet that's got to be a great feeling to get that kind of testimonial back.
Yeah, I think just most of us, I mean, if we're being realistic, I mean, I think what most of us are really just looking for is like, dude, are the ducks in the area? You know, and
that's right.
That's the big thing, because we all know that, I mean, a lot of times when they get to an area and migrate here, they could spend the whole winter in one area in a 4 square mile area, but they're over on that field today, or
that's right.
the next few days, or whatever it is, so, but it sure is nice to know, it's a little bit of an addiction with this stuff, because I mean, we're looking at it and I'm just like, oh, look at the hot spot. Look at the hot spot. That's right. Dude, that's right where we're going.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess on the flip side of that, if you're not on the hot spot, then you know where to go.
Yeah. And I mean, there's plenty of data gaps that exist where we don't have information, or maybe the information just doesn't float in yet. But I got to say, the areas where, not to toot our own horn, but the areas where we're showing there is a concentration of birds, there's usually some pretty happy hunters there.
Yeah, no doubt. And and the flip side of it all too is, if you're in an area, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but if you're in an area and it's not even showing like the hottest area, I mean, let's be real. If you're a 3-4 man crew out there duck hunting and you get covered up by a couple hundred ducks, it's in the teens that morning. And maybe you're chasing ducks or geese. But now it's September and it's 85 degrees and you're hunting early teal or geese. As a waterfowler, you need dependable weather protection that will not break the bank. Founded in 1996, Frog Togs is not only the leader in breathable wader technology, but a company you can depend on to keep you warm and dry, head to toe, no matter your hunting environment. Stay bone dry by using discount code ZD315 for 15% off not only your first purchase, like most discount codes, but how about every single purchase you make from now until December 31st, 2024? That is such a minute amount of the duck population where you're just like, oh my God, dude, we were covered up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In ducks.
Yeah. No, and that's a great way to, I'm really glad you brought that up because that's a great way to put it too. Like so many people will reach out and they're like, hey man, like we're doing really well in, I don't know, Montana, for example, but you're not showing any data there. Well, it's like, well, first off, like we just don't have a data feed from there. So we can't really do much with that. But then also too, like, this is all relative. Like I'm showing a giant red spot around St. Charles, Missouri right now. And all that means is that relatively speaking, the highest or a very high concentration of ducks is right there. That doesn't mean that there's nothing going on in Michigan. That doesn't mean there's nothing going on in Indiana or, you know, northern Missouri. It just means relatively speaking, if we're looking at the entire map, that is where the highest concentration is. And, you know, you might be in northern, you know, Iowa or Nebraska right now and be doing just fine, only seeing a couple hundred ducks because you're just in a really good spot.
Yeah.
But if you were to go to St. Charles and go look at some of those flooded bottoms right now, like there's just a lot more there. Your opportunities might be better because there's more there, I guess.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it'd probably be a good time now to kind of go into, you know, the new feature that you guys just launched with the AI picture and video and all that, Joe. Can you give us a breakdown on all that?
Yeah, it's a perfect time to segue to that. So we sent out a survey at the end of last season and asked people a lot of questions and just said, hey, you know, some of the easy gimme questions like, would you recommend us to a friend out of 5 stars? What would you say? You know, what would you rate Migration Station? But we also sought feedback. Like if you could implement something for Migration Station, what would it be? And overwhelmingly, people said you need to increase your data coverage. We have a large following in Texas, and we just didn't have high quality data in that state, data that we felt comfortable sharing, if that makes sense. It gets back to the verifiable and authenticatable information, like just stuff that we were willing to put our stamp on. And so what I did in the off season is developed a process that utilizes software and a little bit of artificial intelligence. And I'm going to be very clear. This is in its beta phases. You know, Facebook and Google, they would look at this and they wouldn't be too proud, but it works and it's in its infancy. But the ability to take pictures or take videos from our users, have them send it to us. The first check is to say, okay, is this real? So I won't share exactly how the sausage gets made because I don't want people to figure out a way to get around our authentication process. But needless to say, if you pull an image off of Google and you submit it to us, we'll know and we'll be able to kick it out. But then after that, now that we verified that this image and video is like authentic, it's real, we have a program that'll go through and it just counts birds. And some of it, if the quality is high enough, it will actually be able to pick out the number of birds in that video or that image. Wow. And so from that, we're able to get an idea of like, okay, if you give us this video or image, you kind of give us some more additional details, we can point that to a specific latitude and longitude. And we're not talking like the honey hole. We don't need coordinates to your honey hole. It's just like, what's the nearest town? You know, is the nearest town Galveston, Texas? Is it Houston, Texas? Whatever. And from that, we can kind of add more data points to our migration map. So if you go to our migration map on our website now, you'll see a little toggle that says additional data. If you click it, you'll see more data points pop up. And then from there, if you click on those data points, you can actually see the images in the videos or still frames from the videos that are submitted to us with the underlying data. So effectively, you'll see not only will you see a little bit of a warm spot in North Texas right now, you'll also be able to click on the data point and see who submitted it if they gave us the permission to, you know, use their name or their social media handle. And you'll also be able to see the image that they submitted. So like by doing that, we're increasing our data coverage, but you know that the data is authentic and verifiable. And so we're keeping the high data quality standard that we've set for ourselves and increasing data coverage. And, you know, I think we rolled that out 3 weeks ago, and it's been a great success for us. We've really started to expand our footprint, and I'm really proud of that. Really, really happy with it.
That's awesome. And one thing kind of similar to, it sounds like the Texas situation last year is, I know last time we talked, for the Atlantic Flyway, that was kind of a tough cook, nut to crack for you guys as well. And with the amount of time we spend in, like for example, this weekend we're going up and hunting, or going down and hunting in Georgia for the veteran hunt down here. And, just stuff like that. Or when we're in Florida, for us to be able to tag and say, hey, whatever is going on down here and submit some stuff, I think that's really neat. And I don't know how your other coverage has changed since the last time we talked in that flyaway, but I just think that's a great way to kind of, I don't know, kill two birds with both stones, it sounds like, or two birds with a stone,
Yeah, our Atlantic Flyway coverage is it could still use some help. So if you got any plugs over there, definitely plug them.
Sounds good.
There's also something to be said about season's still relatively young. We're still gaining traction for the season, but adoption in places where it needed to be adopted, it's definitely on the ups. Texas, I'm really pleased with. I think if you were to go on the map right now, I think we have 8 data points in Texas, which, considering we had none all year last year, I'm pretty pleased with.
Yeah, no, that's amazing.
Yep. So the easiest way to do that, if you guys care to, or if any of your followers care to, just go to www.migrationstationusa.com, go to our migration map, and then you'll see a button that says submit a report. Should take you no longer than 30 seconds to submit it. We just ask for the nearest town, so we don't need coordinates to your honey hole, but the nearest town, your name, and submit the image or the video, and then that's it. And we can take it from there, and within 24 hours you'll see it pop up on our migration map.
Yeah, I know. I think that's really sweet.
Yeah, that is cool. That's super cool.
Yeah. I will say, though, it's got to be live birds. We have plenty of people sending us pile pictures, which, hey, I'm very excited that you guys had great hunts, but I can't really do much with the migration map if I'm looking at a bunch of, harvested game.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, man, we should have plotted one last weekend when we were spec hunting in northeast Arkansas, because the amount of, I know you got geese on here too, well, Canada geese, but the amount of ducks we were seeing last weekend for this early in northeast Arkansas, and with there not being a lot of water around, was insane.
Yeah.
Man, I'm telling you, that Halloween or pre-Halloween cold snap up front, it was, I don't know if you've watched our last video or not, the one that we posted, I think, on October 26th, but I don't think the conditions have been that good for a migratory event in a long time, that early, I should say. I mean, it's not even November, and you've checked all 4 boxes for a migratory event, and everyone that we've talked to have said, like, they're seeing birds really move earlier than they would have anticipated compared to years past.
Yeah.
Arkansas is no exception.
That's consistent from what we've seen and heard too from different people out that way. And I mean, it was wild. Like, we actually kind of off topic, but we had a group of specs come in, and there were 7 of them, and we couldn't shoot into them because there was probably about 150 pintails with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, watching these stupid geese are flying, and they're following the lead pintail. You're like, stop that.
Man, it's funny. It's funny what birds will do sometimes, and they move together. And I think the funniest thing I've ever seen before is, in southeast Missouri, towards December and January, you get a big push of snow geese pretty much every year. And was hunting a public area down there, and long story made short, you just hear the snow geese get up off the refuge. You know what I mean? It's just a roar. Yeah. And then you see in the distance the flock coming your way. And then as they come overhead, probably 150, 200 yards up, you look, and there's this little teal just leading the pack, just working its little tail feathers off just to lead this giant group of geese. And it's just funny what they do sometimes.
That is. Joe, and this might be a kind of a curveball question and something I just thought about, but I don't want to spin down the whole rabbit hole of how duck populations are assessed by the professionals out there doing what they do. Mm-hmm. But I do know that I'm not the smart. I'm not even close to the smartest person. But I will say this: it definitely seems like to me that there's some opportunities for these folks to embrace a little bit better technology that we now have on our hands to assess these numbers. Do you foresee like what you guys do tying into any of those professional organizations to help them estimate waterfowl populations?
Man, I appreciate the question. When we started Migration Station, we thought about how can we kind of usher in the next era of waterfowl conservationists, waterfowl hunters, and waterfowl, biologists from like a data perspective. And I think it'd be incredibly hubris of me to say that we're that company. But if that opportunity were to ever present itself, where we could kind of tie in what we're doing to the benefit of the waterfowling public through these public agencies, I would warmly embrace that. I think there is possibly some opportunity there, and I would be all ears. I would definitely be all ears.
Yeah, I was just sitting there thinking about it, and there's so many times that, and I'm not pointing fingers anywhere, but I'm just saying, there's so many times where we just keep doing the same thing that we've done. Because why? Yeah. Because that's the way we do it.
Right, yeah.
And technology's changing, especially with the AI and stuff coming on now. And I just thought, that's one thing that I'm excited to see as years go on how the conservationists, the biologists, and everybody else that's out there that are assessing these populations, how they can embrace the technology to do so.
Yeah, and I think it's, to be clear, I think what the work that is being done and the doing things the way we've always done them, but we're doing them the way we've always done them because it works for the most part. And if it hasn't, they've stopped. But sure. I think using or embracing technology, and again, I'm not talking just about Migration Station, I'm talking about any technology or any artificial intelligence. It's not a 1 + 1 = 2. You got the human element, the human experience. You've got this technology. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 actually ends up equaling 3. They're additive together. By combining those two things, you actually get a much better end product. I haven't seen that because I don't do what they do, but I firmly believe that would be the outcome.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that is always a I guess a funny subject, at least where we hunt, and I know I forgot the name of the big valley there in Indiana too, but if you were to ask us hunters, and we're talking about everybody that we know and associate with in Arkansas, where we hunt, they would tell you that there should be a daily limit of pintails more than one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the thing that you got to take into consideration with all that, is you as the hunter might be sitting there going, dude, look, there's 5,000 pintails right there, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's not even a dent in the overall pintail population. That's a lot of birds, don't get me wrong, but let's spread them out across the United States. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a very interesting point you bring up. So last year, I think it was, there's a threshold that gets set that effectively says if the amount of pintails that we count in our normal counting areas falls below X, we're going to close the season on pintails. So last year, we were almost at that threshold. Yeah. But I think and this is no secret, this isn't me outing anybody, I think the biologists would admit this themselves. There's this.
In the outdoors, every detail counts. See sharper, aim clearer. From the river's edge to the heart of the flooded timber, Hook and Bullet has your vision covered. Hook and Bullet's purpose-built optics are flawlessly crafted to give you an edge regardless of your outdoor pursuit. Use code ZeroDuck30 for 15% off a pair of Hook and Bullet sunglasses today.
Too much area to cover, and a large part of the areas we don't cover is northern Canada. Well, on a dry year, pintails will just skip the pothole region and they will go straight to northern Canada. Yeah. And so if you have a healthy population of breeding pintail up there, it's no secret they don't do as well up there, but they do breed up there. Yeah. That go uncounted, your population might be a lot better than you anticipated, but these biologists, they've decided, hey, we'll stick to the framework we have in the areas that we count, because at worst case scenario, we have a limit of pintail of 1 when the limit could be 3 or 4, but they're not making a mistake on the other end. You know what I'm saying? They're not saying, let's kill 3 or 4, when in reality we should only be getting 1. Right. So it's a little bit more restrictive in that sense, but they're sticking to the framework. And I don't know how you fix that other than just spend more money, and they fly more surveys, which I tend to think, they don't even, a lot of states don't coordinate the efforts of the midwinter survey anymore. I tend to think that asking for any more money than we're getting from these agencies is, well, I'll just say I think we need to be content with what we got.
Yeah.
In that regard, I should say.
Sure. Well, and we've talked about it before, but if you don't know this about pintails, folks, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Joe, but as far as I know, is that what makes their breeding habits unique is that if they go back to a place where they had, laid their eggs before, and they get there and it's dry, like you said, they just won't breed. They don't go like another duck and say, okay, well, I'm going to go a mile over here, 2 miles over there, or something like that. They won't breed. And, I think one of the big scares were, about 3 years ago when we had that big dry up in the Prairie Powell region, I know Ducks Unlimited talked a lot about it, and that really affected the pintail population in a big way because they had been going there for, however many years. And then they're like, okay, no. Well, then as I followed some of the podcasts of Dr. Mike Brazier talking about how some of those pintails over the last couple of years have slowly started to find their new spots, and they I know there was a big push of them in eastern Montana and in that region and stuff like that. So it's a funky bird on top of it to be able to gauge the populations, they just have their funny ways.
They have their little quirks. Yeah, they really do. And I think, it's no secret. So the biologist and the doctor that you mentioned, Mike Brazier, definitely one of the leading authorities, if not the leading authority. So don't take me as any expert, but what I will say is that from what I've heard too is pintail they're a little quirky, and they are not as prolific renesters as other species of birds, like mallards, for example. If they aren't successful the first time around, they're probably just not gonna breed. Which, you have too many years of that. That really hurts the population in a bad way.
Sure.
You gotta have young recruitment for a healthy population of waterfowl.
Yeah, just imagine. One of the biggest numbers that has blown my mind today about waterfowl population is, and this came off of a DU podcast, is that they said that the blue-winged teal has a mortality rate of over 60%. That's to me is nuts how important that next brood of ducks is, to the blue-winged teal, to lose 60% of your population and to still be one of the most successful birds out there, it just blows my mind.
I could be wrong. It's been a minute since I've looked at it. I want to say blue-winged teal are the second most populous waterfowl in North America right now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, second most populous duck. I think Canada geese would probably take that spot, but second most populous duck behind mallards are blue-winged teal.
Yeah.
That's crazy. 60%.
Yeah. That's nuts.
That's rough.
That is, man. That is. And I don't know all the reasons why that is, and it could be a lot to do with habitat or whatever it is, but could have something to do with, our shotguns down in Georgia and Florida too. So we like we like to
Texas
chase some blue-winged teal. And Texas.
So. And so do our friends over in Louisiana. I think that's their primary take is blue-winged teal, and boy, they know how to cook them. That's for dang sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I heard those Louisiana folks know how to cook some wild game.
Well,
that is a fact.
Well, if anybody comes up to you and goes, dude, I can make a badass coot sandwich, you're just like, pause.
Well,
you get a little sideways and guarantee you eat that thing, it's going to be delicious.
Yeah, exactly. I guarantee you, if there were a handful of people in the world that if they were to, and they would probably all be from South Louisiana, if they were to say, man, I made a coot gumbo or a coot jambalaya, and I think would just be to die for. I probably would take them up on it. It probably would be better than anything I could prepare. Prime steak or otherwise.
Yeah, and to date, and we've all said this, it makes such a big difference how you prepare the meat and everything else that you do. And, taking care of the meat, preparing it, all that stuff. But, one of our favorite sandwiches to date was the stinkiest duck I've ever smelled in my life. And that's a buffalo head,
Yeah.
And our friend's wife, we came over for dinner one night and she made us this buffalo head, cantaloupe, toasted cheese, something sandwich. And I was like, dude, there's no way that's a buffalo head. There's just no way. There is no way because that sucker stunk.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I got to tell you, I've always, and I think it's just because I've never known any different, but I've always only ever made the duck poppers out of my waterfowl, or I've made jerky out of them in a dehydrator, which has turned out pretty good. But I think this year I'm really going to try to lean into doing a little bit more ornate things. But one thing I'm really going to have to get my head around is anywhere you look on these recipe books or, social media, all these chefs are talking about, you want to cook your duck. And I'm not a cook. I need to say this disclaimer, like, don't take my advice and go get food poisoning. But they say, like, you want to keep it medium rare.
Yeah.
And I mean, that just goes against every bone in my body, because you got this stinking bird that, when you're cleaning it and harvesting it, half of what they eat is probably mud.
Right.
And they're like, I just think, you want to cook that thing to 160 minimum. And apparently everyone says if you cook them past a certain point, it goes from tasting really good to tasting really bad.
Yeah.
I can tell you the duck that I've tried to prepare, other than the jerky and the poppers, was I won't be writing any recipe books about it. I'll just put it like that.
Yeah, no, we got a friend of ours, and he took on some old school stuff that the old timers used to do. And when he harvests his ducks, he lets them hang in the refrigerator for 3 weeks, uncleaned, undressed, just the whole duck. And he swears by it, and I would call their family a family of chefs. I mean, they know their stuff, and you don't just get a peanut butter jelly sandwich at their house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were saying something about, again, not like the duck chef myself either, but something about the way waterfowl, meat is, like the enzymes in it break down differently than like other red meat, like beef or whatever. Or venison, and I guess that's kind of something about that aging process really helps with, whatever, the flavor and all that stuff. But one thing we've kind of took up, one of our favorite things to do the last couple of years, is literally just put some good seasoning on it and give it like 2-3 minutes each side on the grill, and a lot of times it turns out really good, unless it's just...
Do you... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, a lot of times it turns out really good, unless it's just, like you get a bloody spot in there or something, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you keep the skin on, like when you put them two side, when you cook them 2 minutes on each side, are you breasting the bird all the way out, or are you defeathering them and then cutting out the breast meat with the skin and fat still intact?
Most of the time when we're doing that, we're not doing the skin. No.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The only, like when I do the stuff with the skin on, it's usually like I'm trying to follow a recipe or whatever. And that's something I really still haven't gotten down that good. Is that whole process,
I'm gonna try it. That's the next thing I'm gonna try is next pack of mallards I get into. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna cook them skin side down, let the fat render out in the cast iron, and by golly, if I can't get that right, then I'm just gonna stop trying and just go back to the poppers. 1 part duck, 10 part cream cheese, bacon, and jalapeno.
And you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
No, you can't. You can't.
Yeah. No, and the seasoning that we've been using is it was by accident the first time with teal. We were like, what kind of seasoning we got in here? We're like, oh, there's some Montreal. It was their
Chicago steak.
No, the first one was the garlic and herbs. And we used that. And I'm like, dang, dude, that's pretty good. Well, I'm a Montreal steak, Chicago steak, Montreal seasoning for my burgers, And I'm like, dude, I'm going to try it with some Montreal steak seasoning. And literally, we just put it on the meat, almost just, cover it all in it and just cook it like that. And we've just been so surprised. But the other thing that I am, and Tristan's about sick of hearing this, but the other thing that I'm doing this year is I am, everybody knows that if you allow red meat, like beef, for example, to get adrenaline in the blood, it's going to not taste good. That's why they swiftly kill cows and stuff, because they don't want that adrenaline in the meat. Well,
Right.
I'll be one factually tell you that if you shoot a wounded deer and you eat that deer, more than likely it's going to have that taste in it because of the trauma that deer went through and the adrenaline compared to a clean kill. What also affects the taste of red meat is age. We all know that, oh man, I got some venison of this young deer and it was awesome. You know what I mean? Or a calf, and we all know this, that, that the older the meat is, like some people don't even eat a really old male pig because they're just like,
Right.
or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I'm doing is I'm separating out the meat that we get this year and paying attention as much as I can to cripples.
You're gonna try to do a little test there.
Yes. So like we went spec hunting last weekend and I separated the juvies that we kept. I got those separate than the adults, and we're going to do taste testing with that stuff, and I just think that, we lose, like, it's so easy to know what you got when you shoot a deer, right? Because you go, okay, well, that deer is old. It's a big piece of meat. But when you go shoot 6 ducks, I mean, it's so hard for us to go, okay, that duck was a cripple. I'll set him over here.
Right.
Or
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or sit there and age your ducks, to see which ones.
Good luck.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I'm gonna be paying attention to you guys' social profiles because I'm curious to see how that goes.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll be very curious to see how that goes.
But yeah,
cool.
Yeah, and I guess one kind of segue into, you mentioned, and we won't have this out till tomorrow anyway. When you got this new the latest update coming tomorrow. I'm curious to know, compared to the October 26th one, with all these factors, are you seeing that the birds just keep piling in, or is things just kind of staying status quo? Like, how are things looking?
Man, if October 26th migration update was yin, this one's definitely yang. But it's interesting for different reasons. So
our partners at Huntwise are offering an exclusive discount for Zero Duck 30 followers. As an elite member, some of the features you'll immediately gain access to are Huntcast, Windcast, peak kill times, property lines, owner information and phone lookup, 250 map layers, unlimited offline maps, 3D maps, social media, and on top of it all, save up to 50% on some of the top hunting brands in the industry. Download and explore the #1 hunting tool set today and save 20% by using code DUCK30.
I've always said the 4 main things, and this was in the last video, the 4 main things that are going to affect birds more than anything else, or the migration of ducks and geese, I should say, are temperatures, weather, winds, and moon phase / just amount of light that they have that they're able to work with. And so if it's freezing cold and all the rivers freeze up, they're going to move. If there's 12 inches of snow in the Dakotas, they're going to move. If there's a north wind, they might get up there, and if it's something that they can take advantage of, they might do it. And if it's a full moon, they always move on full moons. It's a well-known thing. You have all 4 of those things like we had a week or so back. Man, you really have a lot of encouragement to move, and I think we saw that. However, if you look at the week ahead's weather, and mainly this coming weekend and next weekend, it's nothing really to get too worked up about. But have you guys ever heard of the term Veterans Day mallards or Veterans Day migrations?
No,
just Halloween.
Okay, if you talk to folks around Arkansas and Missouri specifically, some of them might mention Veterans Day as a big push, and if you watch the video when we post it, you'll see some data that we have to support it. But man, whether you're in California, Missouri, Illinois, all the way to Maryland, across the country, these mid-latitude states, the 2nd or 3rd week of November, they always see a very large uptick in bird concentrations. And if you look into why that might be, a lot of people are speculating, and I kind of fall into this camp as well, that photoperiodism might be, at play here. And what photoperiodism is just a fancy way of saying the amount of light that they have to work with is decreasing. So between our last video and this next video, the days will be about 45 minutes shorter. So there's already 45 minutes less daylight. But on November 13th, I think it is, there is a new moon phase, meaning there is no moon. So not only are the days almost an hour shorter, you're going to have zero nighttime illumination. There is something internal to some animal species, and fowl would be included in those, where they start, that internal clock starts ticking and talking, and they thinking we've got to move. If we're going to make our move, we need to move because things are starting to change. And it's almost like clockwork. Second or third week in November, birds start moving, and it's probably due to that. So we're admitting in the video, the weather is nothing to get too crazy about, but if you're in one of those mid-latitude states, like don't write off the upcoming weekend, because you've got this biological or this physiological factor that might just move some birds down. So, we'll see.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting because I've heard of photo migrators or whatever, but to hear it from that perspective is just really interesting. And looking forward to seeing how that plays out. We'll be in Arkansas opening weekend, and so we'll see how things go. Maybe we'll be able to drop an update for you.
Yeah, what? I hope for you guys it's a positive one, but let me know. We're not always we've never claimed to be 100% accurate or right all the time, but we use the data we got and we use science to try to make our predictions, and hopefully it pans out. But I'll be very interested.
Yeah,
it'd be interesting to see if the birds that have already moved though were the ones that would have moved anyways. Because if you look at these same areas, like Missouri specifically, I think we just had a post on Instagram about it a few days ago. Missouri got one of the biggest pushes of ducks early than they've ever had. Not ever, but in a really long time.
Yeah, I read that.
So maybe the birds that would have moved next weekend have already moved. It's hard to tell, and you'll never know. Mother Nature does her thing, and we're just here to try to figure it out.
Yeah, and I'm kind of wondering with the little bit of a warm up, if everyone always talks about reverse push on a warm up kind of, or a south wind and that kind of combination. If how that's going to play into things, like you said, with the weather kind of being mid over the next 10 or so days.
Yeah. Yeah. What's wild to me about this, and maybe it's just because I'm uneducated about it, but it seems like, Tristan and I have been so fortunate to have some incredible professional guests on here, biologists and stuff in the waterfowl in the waterfowl community. And what's crazy, and I'm talking about folks that are GPS tracking and all this stuff. I haven't seen one of them say anything about a reverse push. Not one. When like if you go, for example, and go to Cohen Wildlife Research with Dr. Bradley Cohen, what he's doing there I think it's out of the University of Tennessee, is it, or West Tennessee or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, for the majority, when he says, okay, here is mallard number 67B40, right? And that most of every single one that they'll show on those things, they got here when they came, and they stay in the area. They do for the most part, and we've even talked with him about, there's that whole myth about, oh, you look up in the sky and you see them way up there and you're like, oh, those are migrators. He says, not necessarily. They can get up that high, and they will sometimes, and they might only be going a couple miles, or something.
Yeah. So I think those studies that those folks are doing, Dr. Kellen being one of them, and there's also some telemetry data coming out from some private folks or some folks that have, maybe some public or nonprofit funding on speckled bellies in Arkansas. But that telemetry data is going to be so valuable for answering questions, but it's going to be one of those things where this is an opinion here, but it's going to be one of those things where as you answer questions and you gain more insight, you actually end up with more questions. So like collectively, we are getting smarter with respect to waterfowl, but by getting smarter, we're actually opening up these possibilities for more questions.
Right.
Because anecdotally, anybody in Southeast Missouri would tell you on a hard south wind day on a warm up, birds are going to show up. That's just it. They're going to be coming out of the south off the river.
Yep.
But there's also this telemetry data, like you say, that says, hey, these birds are in West Tennessee and they've stayed in West Tennessee and they're going to stay here for a long time.
Yeah.
And what that might I won't even say what that tells you. What that might lead one to think is that, okay, well, if we know the telemetry data says those mallards in West Tennessee stay in West Tennessee, we know anecdotally, and the harvest data and count data will show this, public areas in southeast Missouri, after a thaw up and a hard south wind for a couple of days, their duck counts go up.
Mm-hmm.
If those two things are true, then maybe there's something to be said about Missouri mallards and Arkansas mallards and Tennessee mallards are inherently different. They've got different, not genetically, but they're different behaviorally.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this telemetry data might lead us to start thinking and start asking ourselves questions about is, maybe a Missouri mallard is the same genetically as a Tennessee mallard, but maybe they behave very differently, and maybe there's something to that.
Yeah.
More questions than answers. I'm just kind of hypothesizing here, but really interesting stuff and really cool things we might get to kind of see into over the next few years.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if we brought this up the last time you were on, Joe, but one of the most interesting things in that kind of vein that I saw Dr. Cohen post last year was when it got real cold there, around, I think, Christmas or whatever, they, a lot of people just destroyed mallards and ducks in general, they're around his area and, where they track, which would lead a lot of people to think, oh, it froze up north. We got this great push of birds because of that. And his data actually kind of suggests that really what happened was where these birds were sitting there around all the tracked mallards he had, all of a sudden they couldn't sit in those areas. So anybody on big water, they were destroying birds, but it wasn't necessarily just birds that were getting pushed out of, the north. It was birds that were already there, might have been there since Halloween sitting in the same spot, but then all of a sudden that's froze up and they had to go to the big water. So that was kind of really interesting to hear how their data was suggesting that,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's all kind of dependent upon factors and, things that we won't have perfect insight into. I know, I think it's Dr. Cohen's data as well talks about a mallard that stayed in Calgary, Alberta all year and all winter. Wow. And it literally, the most it would fly in a day is a couple hundred yards. It would go from a warm water discharge area to a river systems grain depot. So it essentially go feed on grain getting spilled out of these grain container ships and then go right back to this warm water discharge area. And that's where it was spent its winter. Just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I know areas in central and northern Missouri, their duck counts went to near zero. And a lot of those birds moved to the Missouri River. And then when the Missouri River froze up, those birds moved out.
Yeah.
I mean, they got to have a place to sit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and it just shows how resourceful they are. They're not going to do more than they have to if they find something that's working.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always try to put myself into their mindset, not to overstate how intelligent a duck is, because they're not overly intelligent, but they're not dumb either. But more than anything, their number one goal for life, I guess, but especially during winter and the migration, is like they just need to do as little as possible to survive, to be able to rear a family in the spring.
Yep.
And so I'm not leaving Calgary because I know I'm going to breed in Calgary, and I got this grain over there and I've got this warm water pond over here. I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
Or if it's, these ducks in Tennessee that are on refuges, they're like, hey, I'm going to sit right here because I'm not getting shot at right here, and I'm not going to leave right here until I have to.
That's right.
They're just trying to do what they need to do to make it.
Yep.
And you and I would too. We would all three do the exact same thing. Like, I'm flying to Georgia and hanging out in a little pond and getting shot at. I'm probably not going to do that anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to try not to.
That's right.
Yeah.
I guess, one kind of last few question I had here for you is,
do you want coffee that doesn't suck? Get the Duck. Dirty Duck coffee is made specifically for the waterfowl enthusiast. Enjoy flavors like Morning Wood, Dark Dynasty, Cinnamon Teal Snickerdoodle, and First Flight to unlock the flavor that you'll enjoy in the blind for years to come. Our friends at Dirty Duck Coffee Company are now offering all Zero Duck 30 followers a 15% discount when you use code ZeroDuck15 on your next order.
So much of this has been talking about your app or whatever. And, your website, I mean, and the data and all that kind of stuff. But just from you personally as a hunter, you know, do you got anything excited that you're looking forward to this year?
Man, it's never a bad time to be a duck hunter or a goose hunter. And I know there are days where, you know, you might go out and not have high hopes and maybe you don't end up getting anything. But man, if you're out there for the right reasons, any day is a good day. And I love waterfowl hunting more than any other kind of hunting, primarily because you can go out with some friends or some old friends, some new friends, or some acquaintances and just hang out, you know, shoot the breeze and just have a good time. Whereas if you're deer hunting or turkey hunting, you can't really do that.
Yep.
And so I'm just really looking forward to with, you know, through Migration Station, we've got some great sponsors this year. Go to our website, check them out. We're super thankful for their support. That's how we're able to do all that we do for free for the public. Through that, we're going to get some opportunities to go hunt in Tennessee and Arkansas. And I'm really looking forward to shaking some people's hands whom I've not met before and, you know, sharing a blind with them. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, there's something, and I would imagine similar to us in the sense of like one thing we did this summer is we went to the Delta Waterfowl Expo, and
I just missed you guys. I
Really?
showed up on the last day. Yeah, it was my wife's birthday, so I celebrated her birthday with her on I guess it would have been the second day of the expo, and so that Sunday when it kind of started winding down, I was there.
Oh,
are you going this year?
It depends. I heard they're going to have it in Louisiana. Is that rumor true? Do you know?
Yep, Baton Rouge.
yep.
Yeah, Little Rock was not too far of a drive. Baton Rouge would be a haul. So I won't say I'm not going, but I can't. I'd have to fly. So I'll have to look into it.
Yeah, we'll have to keep in touch because it'd definitely be cool. Because like you were saying, you know, meeting up with the folks in the duck blind, like one of our favorite things from it is just so many people you meet and talk with online, or people like you, Joe, that we have on the podcast. Like then all of a sudden it's like, hey man, you want to go have a beer or whatever? And it's just, it was a blast. It was a great time for sure.
Oh yeah. And it's such a warm community. And my wife actually brought this up a while back. Like duck hunting and goose hunting is such a different community than the deer hunting community because like, you know, to not to sound, you know, like I'm not rooting for the next guy, but like if I'm a deer hunter in Southeast Missouri, or if I'm a deer hunter in Oklahoma, man, it's cool you got a big deer up in Wisconsin, but like I'm not invested in that. I don't really care how you're managing it up there and what the population in Wisconsin's looking like and what the reports are out of Wisconsin, because that doesn't matter to me. That deer's not going to make it, you know, down to Oklahoma.
Right.
Whereas with ducks, like I'm really invested in how things are going up north, and I'm rooting for those folks because one, our sport needs more people, but two, like if the reports out of South Dakota are really bad, I'm probably not going to have a great season in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
But if people up in Nebraska and Kansas are just having a ball, I can reasonably expect that, you know, the ceiling is high, I guess, for me.
Yeah.
And so because of that, we as a community are way more tight-knit than I would argue any other community in outdoor sports, because we're tied to our resources is a collective resource, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good point, because I thought you were going to go down the you know, thought process of like, you know, you're hunting together as a group versus hunting together, you know, in a tree stand by yourself. But the way you and your wife were talking about it, like that makes so much sense too, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. When it's also that too, like I'm hunting with a group of folks in a duck blind chatting versus if I'm in a tree stand, and there's probably not two of us up here in a tree stand. And if there are, we're not scrolling our phones and having a laugh. Like we're disciplined and trying to stay still and be quiet if we're deer hunting.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing that makes it so great about the sport is that, you know, I don't know what the demographics show, but I my gut would say that, you know, the waterfowl industry has got one of the heaviest amount of populations of women and younger people that hunt because of the communal side of it. You know what I mean? Just like, you know, Tristan's wife going for the first time, she went last year. Her favorite day was the day that we shot the least amount of ducks, but it was some of the funniest blind talk, you know, she enjoyed that part of it, you know, and you got kids now that have, you know, this immediate need this immediate satisfaction. And, you know, you can have a hell of a hunt with birds buzzing your head and not hitting any. But when you take a young person out to a tree stand and say, all right, sit here and be quiet for the next 3 hours and freeze your butt off, to get them excited about that, I feel is Well, I know it is. I mean, because I've done it with my son. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah.
We've always said I'm happy that we came up in the deer hunting side before we started duck hunting, because the amount of patience that we have and expectations is through the roof. But on the flip side of it, it's definitely harder. I can't imagine like thinking about us personally, Tristan, you like the first time taking Katie hunting, her sit out in a deer blind with you for 3 hours when it's 35 degrees, you know, and her go, yeah, that was a blast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, you're exactly right. Like, I can remember vividly some of the all-day deer hunting sit, and you don't see very much, and man, it's miserable. And then some of my fondest memories duck hunting are, now don't get me wrong, you know, the day I go into Missouri timber and we shoot a limit in, 10 minutes, like that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But some of my fondest memories are, one that I'll carry with me forever was probably last year. It was me and my two best friends, both of which were new-ish to duck and goose hunting, one of which it was probably his second hunt ever. I mean, if someone was watching us from the road, they would have just been like, what are these guys doing? We got geese flying over we're not aware of. Our decoys look like crap. We're just not set up right. We don't have a good hide, and we're just having a ball. And we ended up getting one goose. And I mean, that was just, I mean, it was a top memory for sure, because the people we got to share it with, and we hunted seriously and we had a good time. But I mean, man, if you're by yourself on an all-day deer sit, even if you see a handful of deer, that can get pretty tough pretty quick.
Yep, for sure.
Well, man, we appreciate your time and don't want to keep you too long, Joe. But
yeah.
No, it's been great. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on again. And can you tell everyone where they can, if they haven't seen you, where they can get in touch with you at or see your website and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. So look us up on social media. It's at Migration Station USA. I promise, especially our Instagram, I promise you will love our visualizations. They're extremely rich and interesting. We try to capture your attention while also conveying good information. But if you haven't, please go to our website and check that out. We have a live and interactive migration map that is updated daily with authentic and verifiable information. We go through the process of checking the data to make sure it's legit so that you don't have to. Go look at that information, and I promise you'll find yourself using it during the season. So yeah, at Migration Station USA, and then www.migrationstationusa.com. That's where you can find us.
And as a user, I will promise you the same thing.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah,
yes,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be using this new AI feature immediately, and we'll be keeping in touch, man. Thank you again. And,
absolutely.
Like I said, this will be out tomorrow, and we'll be sure and tag you and all that good stuff.
That sounds great. Thanks, guys, for having me. I really appreciate it. And when you guys end up starting your season up, best of luck.
Yes, sir.
You as well,
too.
man.
Be safe.
Have a good night.
All right, see you guys.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
I've been southbound, I've been hellbound, riding on a midnight train. Going too fast now, think I'll slow down, standing in the pouring rain.